Okay, so we are concluding the fourth book of the Torah, and we have two portions again, Matot Maseh. And just I'm going to say one or two things about just placing us where we are in the story and the narrative, and then we can think about the specific portions. And today maybe we'll think about even the names of the portions. The names themselves already give us tremendous Kabbalistic insight. So we are at the end of the journey. The Jewish people leave Egypt, and they journey to the land of Israel. Now, the journey was supposed to take a few days. If you want to walk it, that we're going to read next parsha. Then in the book of Deuteronomy, it says that it's a 11-day journey from Sinai to Israel. Um, it took them 40 years. We know the story. They were delayed, and instead of a short journey, we have a journey that takes 42 steps. And at the end of the journey, the final parsha of the fourth book, the Torah recounts all 42 steps. It says these are the journeys of the Jewish people who left Israel, who left Egypt, and it says these are the journeys, and it goes through every one of the 42. Now you don't really, it's not necessary. If you're really interested in where they stopped, you could turn back. It's not so critical, but that's what the Torah does. And the Kabbalists look at this story and they say, look, every single person goes through a journey in their lifetime and is going to touch upon all these 42 journeys. And some of the journeys seem to be advancing you forward toward your destination, Sinai or the land of Israel. And some of those journeys seem like it's just wandering in the sense of going the wrong way, moving you away from your goal and your destination. So we talk about, I think I talked about this in the past, that we say the Jewish people wandered in the desert for 40 years. That's the way people talk about it, wandering. The Torah doesn't use that term. They say journeying. And there's a big difference between wandering and journeying, because wandering means you're almost aimless. You have nowhere to go. You don't know where you're going, so you're wandering. It's like, okay, I have to be here in town for 40 years, so I'll roam around the streets. Maybe I'll pick up some sales in the Greenwich Avenue sidewalk sales. But journey means there is a direction. And even what seems to be a detour, but every step of the journey, each one of the 42 journeys, the steps are actually advancing you to the place you need to be, but really to the person you need to become. And that opens up a whole genre of Hasidic interpretations. What does each step represent? And the Baal Shem Tov talked about this, and later Hasidic commentaries talk about this. So that's one idea to think about. We're coming at the end of the journey. And like I said, you turn back, and it seems like this journey was full of moments of distraction because instead of advancing, we came to places where we actually had setbacks. So here, at the end of the journey, you have to retell the story. Why? Because up till now, the way I experienced some of those journeys, some of those places as setbacks. But that's only when I was in the moment. In retrospect, after the experience, when I look back and say, yes, that was a negative experience, but what did I learn from that negative experience? In retrospect, now I count all 42 journeys and I say that all of them were a journey. All of them was getting me to my destination, to the place I need to be. So that is the general idea placing us where we need to be in the book. And we can talk about that, and we talked about that in the past years. There's a famous Rashi about a metaphor of a father taking a child to be healed, and then they go back. We talked about that in past years. This year, we could think about it's a beautiful essay from the Rebbe also about simply the lesson from the names of the two parshas, because now the two parshas are together. So you want to think about the names, even though they seem like they're opposite themes. And the point here is that Rebbe often emphasized that sometimes, even if you didn't read the whole parsha, just the name of the parsha itself could teach you a lesson. So the joke is amongst the Chabad rabbis that you used to have to be able to, you used to have to, they used to have to read the parsha to be able to come up with a sermon. But the Rebbe taught us you don't even have to know the parsha. As long as you have the name of the parsha, you could already give a sermon. So that I'm giving you secret information from the rabbinic perspective. But here we're going to think about the names, and we're also going to talk about in the big picture what these names represent, and we also come back to this specific parsha because essentially what we're saying is this is really a metaphor for our life. When I said there's 42 journeys, yes, there's 42 journeys of the Jewish people traveling through the desert, but there are also 42 journeys of every soul um, goes through when it comes down into this earth. From the moment of birth until they reach the end of their life, Yarden Yericho at the Jericho River, at the Jordan River opposite Jericho, that represents the highest achievement a person could receive could reach in their lifetime. And that is where and that is the journey. And when you think about that, so when you want to think about what happens to the soul when it goes through this journey, in some ways, that's also what happened to the Jewish people going through their journey and their desert. And in some ways, it's also individual person, whatever happens to the soul in general, the challenges and the benefits that it gets to coming down into this world is also expressed in any specific challenge. So that dynamic of how we react to difficult circumstances is true for an individual moment of difficulty, but it's also true for just the existence of the soul on this earth, which from the soul's perspective is definitely a challenge and definitely going into an uncomfortable place and an unnatural place. And the way the soul reacts to it is also expressed in how we specifically react to a specific challenge in a specific detail. So that is the roadmap of what we want to do. I hope we hope to at least do some of it, and at least go into the at least go, and then we'll go into the specific essay and come back to where we are in the story. Um, One more thing we want to talk about is that there's also, if you talk about these names, the names, if you want to say what is the lesson of these two names, the names are actually contradictory. Because as we will see, matot, which means a staff, represents firmness. You're strong and you're in one place. Maseh means journey. Journey means you're flexible. So we're going to talk about both of these elements. So the plan for today is I'm going to read some of the essay of the Rebbe inside, and then I hope to also remind me please, also to read a little bit of an adaptation of this essay by a gentleman named Rabbi Yankee Tauber, who writes often on Chabad.org, and he's very poetic, and he writes this very poetic, and I say, I don't want to just hold it for myself. I really want to share it. So after we read a little bit of the essay, we're going to look maybe also at just a sentence or two on how he puts all that information into very short writing, which is very beautiful in my opinion. One more point that I want to talk about, sort of introductory, put another piece of the puzzle on the table, and that is the name for Mateh, which is staff. But in this context, when you say Eila Matot, Moshe spoke to Rashi Hamatot, Moshe spoke to the leaders of the tribes. Now, it's a very unusual word for the word tribes. Usually, how do you say the word tribe? You say shevet, tribe, or shvatim in the plural. And here, for the first time, maybe even the only time, I don't know if it's the only time, but it's one of the only times where you refer to the 12 tribes of Israel or the leaders of the 12 tribes as Rashi Hamatot, the heads of the tribe, but we use a different word. We use staff. Now, when you talk about what does a shevet mean? A shevet means a branch. What does a mateh mean? A mateh means a staff. Now, you see that these words are related because what is a staff if not a branch that has been disconnected and then hardened and became a staff? But you see why shevet, why the tribe is a better word, is a more beautiful word for tribes. Let me just Google for a second. What is the etymology of the English word for tribe? Etymology tribe. The word tribe comes from Latin tribus, originally referring to the ancient three-part political ethnic division of the Roman state. Okay, don't know how that's going to help me, but in Hebrew,
because it's Tri.
Yeah. Yeah, it's three. Okay, good. But in Hebrew, it's totally different. Tribe means a branch. And that we understand why that makes sense because Shevet is a branch because we say a family tree, right? When I say I have a family tree, why the metaphor tree? Because we have the trunk, which is the roots. We have the patriarchs, matriarchs. And then the children are branches that, unintended, branch out. And each one is a branch of that same root. So in Hebrew, there's this word tribe, which means shevet, which means branch. So instead of saying 12 tribes, we say there are 12 branches. And that makes sense because that word highlights that we're all connected, right? Because I say I'm a part of a tribe, but if I say I'm part of a tribe, okay, you could be a tribe, you could be just one tribe. But if I say I'm part of a branch, by definition, that takes me back to my history. I'm a branch of the root. The root is the people who came before me, the patriarchs and matriarchs who came before me. But if I'm a branch, that also means there are other branches. And I'm one tribe amongst many. I guess in the English word, tribe would mean that you're one of many because there's one of three. But in the common language, when you say tribe, tribe just means it could be one tribe. There's this tribe, that tribe. They don't have to be related to other tribes. They may or may not be. But in the Hebrew word, when you say shevet, it's a very telling word because you say a tribe is a branch, and a branch means you have roots. It means you're coming from people before you, and it also means you're related to their other tribes, the other branches of that same tree. So it's a very poetic word. Now, in that context, when you move to this week's parsha, and all of a sudden we say we're no longer tribes, we are a staff. There are staffs, and a staff, a stick, is the branch cut off from the tree, hardened, disconnected from its roots, and disconnected from the other tribes. Okay, that sounds like a massive downgrade. That sounds like a massive downgrade. And I just want to say that I see that in my life because in my life, for example, that's what happens to families. When we're very young, we all went to my grandparents, all the cousins went to my grandparents' house for Hanukkah. We all felt we're part of the tribes. Now, my grandparents have passed on. Now, each one of their children has their own Hanukkah party. We each branch out, but we branch out and we become our own entity. I don't see my cousins the way I used to see them when we were branches because now we matured, we're hardened, we're separate, we're distinct, and in a way, we're becoming disconnected. And that is, in some ways, very sad, but in some ways, very natural. But that's what's happening over here. In a way, we're moving. I don't know what this represents. I mean, we'll see what this represents. But right away, just from the word tribe, and again, tribe is the wrong word, but moving, usually we refer to the 12 branches, and all of a sudden now Moshe speaks to the 12 staffs. Right away, they say, oops, something happened here. We got to get to the bottom of it. And we're going to talk about that. Go ahead, Ben, please.
Does this relate to the menorah? The stem of the menorah, and then the branching out. I guess the branching out. Is that a tribal? Is there a tribal relationship to the menorah? I've never really thought of it that way. But
I wouldn't say tribal because tribal is specifically 12. But and 12 has other meanings. But according to the Kabbalah, it's very clear. Well, even before the Kabbalah, you go to the prophet Zechariah and other prophets. The menorah is a metaphor for the Jewish people, and the idea that there are 6 branches that come out of one stem, and you have 7, and the number 7 is very significant because in the Kabbalah there are 7 character traits, 7 emotional traits, and every person is first of all has all 7, but for the purpose of our discussion, one is more dominant in every person. So some people are more loving, some people are more disciplined, et cetera, et cetera. So when you say there are 12 tribes of it, when there are 12 ways of serving God, in some ways, if you want to count it, there's different ways of counting. But one way, there's 7 ways of serving God. Each person serves God with one emotional trait. Then that's the 7 branches of the menorah. And the menorah, it's very clear. It's one entity. In fact, the way the menorah was made, it was not made the way most people would use metal, which is you take different pieces and weld them together. That's the easier way. The Torah goes out of its way to say that the menorah has to be made miksha. Miksha means it's got to be one piece of gold. So you have one piece of gold, and then you put it into the heat, and then you hammer it out and make it all the intricate designs. And basically, you're pulling the stems apart, the branches apart from the stem. But it's not like separate entities that are connected, but it's actually the same piece of material, the same chunk of material, the same piece of gold has to be made miksha. So there it's true. We're all connected, we're all branches, and we all have the same stem. But life is more complicated because the menorah is the way we are in our source, the way we are in our temple. But once you go out to the nature, we're distant. We're branches, and sometimes you're branches, and sometimes you're a stick. And a stick, you see the stick, you don't even know that there are other sticks, and you don't know that it relates to it's sort of a disconnect. And that's the process where we want to track. And we also want to, So menorah in some ways is a similar metaphor. Correct, absolutely. Okay, I always promise I always commit to sharing the essay. We almost never get around to it, but today is a lucky day. We're going to we're going to read a little bit inside because you get the original. It's better than getting my interpretation. More authentic. Okay, here we go. So this is an essay from the Rebbe on these two parshas, Matot and Maseh. I'm starting for number 4 because before he deals with the 3 weeks, he deals with the other things. But we want to get to the core issue as far as we're concerned. Okay, as mentioned many times, the Baal Shem Tov taught that the name of an entity in Hebrew, the Holy Tongue, conveys its fundamental life energy and communicates what it represents. So this is a very interesting topic that we spoke about when we studied the Tanya, the second section of Tanya. And this is an interesting idea. That is as follows. When all languages are by convention. In other words, people decide to call the table, and they call the table. What's the connection between the table and the letter Table? Nothing. In Hebrew, we say Hebrew is the holy tongue. What does holy tongue mean? Holy tongue means that's the language through which God created the world. It says God said, "Let there be light," and there was light. Well, what language did he speak in? Was it English? Was it British English? Was it Canadian English? Was it American English? It was Hebrew. And even though God did not speak literally, but the point is that the letters of the Hebrew alphabet, each one represents a certain energy. And that energy actually is expressed in the way the letter looks, the form of the letter. And the name of something in biblical Hebrew represents the energy of that concept. So in other words, the word table in Hebrew, there is a connection between the table and the Hebrew word. Now, I'm talking about biblical Hebrew. I'm not talking about modern Hebrew, which is a very beautiful language, but it's, again, by convention. In fact, there's a full-time committee that decides new Hebrew words. So it's not as organic it's also organic, but it happens to be that they have this committee. But the point is, that's the modern Hebrew. I'm referring specifically to biblical Hebrew. Either way, we're introducing this concept to tell you that the name of the portion is accurate and precise and is related to the theme of the portion. Okay. Similarly, with regard to the names of the Torah reading, the inner theme of the entire Torah reading is reflected in its name. That's what I said earlier. Go ahead.
I thought the names came later, though. The names of the parshas came later. That's not in the Torah. Or
Correct.
am I wrong about that?
Correct. No, you're not wrong. You're not wrong about that. You're not wrong about that. But by divine, you're not wrong about that. The names come later, but the names are biblical Hebrew names. And if for at least 1,000 years, if not more, in some cases, no, it's a Mishnah. At least for 2,000 years, people have been using this name to describe this parsha. It means that this is the name of the parsha. So just because Moshe didn't reveal it to us, but the people intuited it. When I said that I'm talking that it has to be not names like convention, I mean the word itself, right? The word mateh is biblical Hebrew. The word maseh is a biblical Hebrew. In fact, it's in the parsha. How do you know that the word maseh should be the name of the parsha? That was not conveyed by Moshe. That was developed later, a few hundred years later. But the Rebbe talks about that in other places. But the point is that we say that if it has become the custom to use this for thousands of years, that must be precise. That's by divine providence. But again, what is divine providence? That there is a biblically Hebrew name that captures the essence of the parsha. Okay, so I hope this helps. Either way, with regard to the Torah reading under discussion as well, the names of which they are referred to according to Jewish custom, Matot and Maseh, communicates the inner theme of those respective Torah readings. And here in the footnotes, he talks about all the places, the earliest sources where the parshas are referred to by this name. Okay, now we're going to get into the branch versus staff metaphor. Here we go. To explain the above, there are two Hebrew terms used to refer to the tribes of the Jewish people, Shvatim and Matot, which is branches and staffs. And usually, like I said, the much more common one is Shvatim, which is tribes. We say there are 12 Shvatim. Also in modern Hebrew, by the way, if you're going to say Matot, no one's going to know what you're talking about. In modern Hebrew, when you want to say tribe, you say Shevet. Both of which also describe branches detached from a tree. Oh, so this is even more. Even a branch, when you're going to say a branch, it doesn't have to mean it's connected. It could be disconnected. But the point is, it still looks like a branch. You see that it still has some moist. It still looks like a branch of a tree. Whereas a staff, it's already formed. Maybe you peeled off the bark. Maybe you shaved it down. it doesn't look like it's part of a tree. It looks like something different, right? Your broomstick doesn't look like it comes from a tree, even though it did. The branch that fell off your tree and is sitting in your yard, even if it's disconnected, it's clear that it comes from a source. Okay. It comes from a tree. The difference between them is that shevet describes a branch that is still supple. Is that a word? I guess soft, right? I think soft. While mateh implies that the branch has become hardened and firm, like a staff used for support. The reason for the difference between them is that shevet refers to a branch that is still flowing with the sap of the tree. Indeed, sometimes the term is used to describe a bough that is still attached to the tree. Therefore, it is still fresh and supple. By contrast, the term mateh is used specifically when a branch has been cut off from its nurture from the tree, and therefore has become firm and hard. So now we have two terms. We have a branch which is soft, still has life, and a staff which is firm because it's disconnected from the tree and it's dried up. Its vitality has been dried up. Okay, now let's apply this to the Jewish people. And as we say, we're going to talk about the soul descending from heaven. And there are times that we are more like branches, and there are times that we're more like a staff. And I'm just going to give you a spoiler alert. In the beginning of our talk, our discussion, becoming a staff is a downgrade. You're disconnected from your source. You're not connected to vitality. You're not connected to spiritual life. But because we're in a Hasidic group over here, if you hang on long enough, and we'll get there before 11, if not, we'll have to skip there, you will see that the becoming from a branch to a staff is not only a downgrade, in many ways, it's an upgrade. And that's because, like we know in this world, if you're investing or anywhere else, that the greatest growth can come when the risks are high and the challenges are high. So for the outset, we're going to start with mateh being a downgrade, with staff being a downgrade, but then hopefully we're going to also grow to see the opportunities that come with becoming a staff. Okay. In a like manner, there is a difference between the way these two terms are used to refer to the Jewish people. Both terms, shvatim, branches, and matot, staff, refer to the souls of the Jewish people as they stem from the ultimate root and tree, godliness, the sublime tree. In other words, every soul is a branch. Branch of what? A branch of its source. What's the source of life? Source of life is God. The term shvatim refers to these souls as they share a revealed connection to godliness, i.e. when they are attached to the sublime tree. In general, this term refers to the soul as it exists in the spiritual realms in a state of ongoing bitul and dveikut, self-nullification and cleaving to God. In other words, when the soul does not see itself as an independent existence, when the soul sees itself as submerged within the light of God, or a different metaphor, when the soul sees itself as dveikut is a very Hasidic word, which means attachment. The Baal Shem Tov taught that whatever you do, even if you're going, mundane matters, you can always maintain dveikut. You can always maintain this cleaving and attachment to holiness. So if the soul is in a state where it feels connected, then it's a branch. By contrast, matot refers to the Jews when their connection with their source is not apparent. It is not clearly evident that they are attached to godliness. I sense myself as an independent existence. Maybe I think about God, maybe I worship God, maybe yes, maybe no, sometimes more, sometimes less. But I have my own autonomy. I'm my own person. I don't see myself as an extension of the divine, even though I am, but not of my consciousness. Okay. In general, this term refers to the godly soul as it descends to the physical plane and enclothed itself in the body and animal soul. Through this descent, the soul becomes materially oriented, hardened by having to face the challenges of this material realm. It is as if it were cut off from the sublime tree. And in a way, that's what's happening here. In a way, coming into this world, by definition, makes the soul move from the state of being a branch to the state of being a tree. And if we have time, we could talk about this later. That's also what a challenge is. Because when I'm in a challenge, I don't see that I'm a journey. I don't see myself connected to where I need to be. I don't see myself connected to my source. I see myself as just sort of drifting away. I'm disconnected from everything around me. We'll get to that later. Thus, as the name of the Torah reading matot refers to the souls of the Jewish people as they have descended and became materially oriented to the extent that they are like an entity detached from its source. So in other words, the way we're setting it up now, the first name of the parasha, the name of the first parasha, matot, staff, as opposed to branch, represents the soul descending into the challenging world, where it's pretty harsh, but it gets in some ways disconnected from its source. It doesn't feel connected. What's the purpose of the descent? So we know in Judaism and the Kabbalah specifically, they always quote the idea that every descent is a springboard for an ascent. Why do you go down in order to go up? There's no point of going down. The metaphor would be if you're walking and there's an obstacle and you have to jump over the obstacle, so you have to go back so you can run and create momentum and jump forward. So the descent is the momentum that will allow you to jump higher. So now we're going to say, so the first parsha represents descent, and the second parsha, journeys, represents here the end of the journey, represents the advantage that the soul reaches through coming down into this world. And where is that advantage? The advantage is when the person passes on. When the soul goes back up to heaven, it reaches a higher state than it was before it came down. And that's what we're going to say. But that's only step one, where matot and maseh are two separate entities. It gets a little bit more complex. We're going to see more benefit in the hardening as we move forward. By contrast, the name Maseh, journeys, indicates that one departs entirely from its previous place. And in the instance referred to in this Torah reading, comes closer to the Holy Land, a loftier place. In the parallel within our divine service, this refers to the ability to proceed and advance that the soul gains through its descent into the physical world, where it becomes a mateh, a staff. It is specifically through this descent that the soul gains the potential to reach a loftier level than the state in which it previously existed in the spiritual realms prior to the descent to this world. In other words, the soul was on a given specific spiritual level. When it comes down and it hardens and it disconnects from its source and it becomes its own entity and it faces challenges, so it's hardened, meaning in the negative sense, it becomes disconnected from its source, but that leads to greater journey, meaning it propels it forward to a higher space and closer to God, and that moving closer to Israel, which in this case, Israel is a metaphor for the promised land at the end of life. And here we go. What's the difference? The difference is that before the soul comes down, the soul is stationary. It could be very spiritual, it could be very lofty, but it's stationary. It's like the angels. The angels are referred to as omdim. They stand still. When you come down into this world, you're challenged, you fall, but you're moving. And you're moving, then you get to a state of growth that you did not have before. It's almost like the advantage of imperfection. When something is perfect, it may be perfect, but it stays this. But it's so perfect it doesn't change. Perfection doesn't change. When a person is going to move, a human being, the advantage of the human being is not that they're more perfect than the angels, but that they're moving. And if you're not static, and if you're moving, then you reach a higher level. So let's read the next two paragraphs, and then we'll open up for anyone who has any comments or questions. Okay. Before its descent, where are we? Okay. Yeah. Okay. Before its descent to this world, the Jew's soul is described as standing, i.e., static, similar to the angels, who are described in that manner. In the books, in the prophets, specifically Zechariah, we read it on the Haftarah of Hanukkah. We refers to the angels as people who stand still. Because in their lofty realms, the love and fear of God is defined and measured. So maybe the soul has an intense love with God, but it always stays the same. And it's measured exactly according to its nature, exactly the way according to understand the greatness of God. That's how much love is produced based on its nature. So it's all limited. Accordingly, even though the soul continually ascends to higher levels in those realms, the ascent is limited, dependent on, and relative to its previous level. The soul never departs its previous level entirely, therefore is described as standing. So yes, you grow, but you grow within your box, within your comfort zone, within your states. However, by descending into the body and the animal soul on this physical plane, the soul becomes a mateh. It becomes a stick. When it studies and observes the Torah and mitzvot, which are God's wisdom and will, while enclosed in the body and seemingly departed from its source, it gains the potential for maseh, for journeying forth. It is able to journey forth and become one who progresses, reaching incomparably higher levels than those on which it existed in the spiritual realms there beforehand. So you could think about this in many different terms. You think about AI, and AI has a lot of problems, but eventually, at least some people believe it's going to get the perfect perfection. It's going to get you the perfect piece of writing. What's the problem? The problem is that nobody wants perfection. Perfection is angel. Human beings want to see struggle. Human beings want to see mistakes. Human beings want to see setback. So ultimately, the reason why I believe people are going to keep coming back to human art in all forms is not because human art is perfect. To the contrary, specifically because it's imperfect. And that's related to the idea that angels are perfect. The love of God is perfect. The souls are perfect when they're in heaven. They're perfect. They're exactly the way they should be, exactly the way they were created, but there's no movement. There's no failure, and there's no growth. And that's what happens. So when we become disconnected, So you say it's a sad situation. I'm disconnected from my source. Yes, but I become my own entity and I become mobile. I could move. And that's step one, where matot is the negative, mas'e is the positive. Staff is negative, journey is positive. We're going to come back later and say staff itself is also positive because we're Hasidim. So we cannot just we're never satisfied with the negativity because that's only the external layer. We believe there's always, you penetrate deeper, you will see that there's positive in everything. So even if you have to sign off now, rest assured, it's not positive, it's not negative and positive, it's going to be positive and positive. You just have to give it a few minutes to unfold. Go ahead, Vicky, please.
Well, thank you, Rabbi. Thank you for the for those beautiful ideas. To you and to Rebbe. But my question is, I'm not worried about people on this call because they're searching, they're consciously aware of the source. But what happened to those souls that during the journey, they're not consciously aware of the source, and even through the end of their lives? So is it also, they also, by the end of life, they also get connected somehow?
Ultimately, the answer is yes. Ultimately, the answer is yes, but we don't know because we don't know the mysteries of creation. And in the fall, we're going to do another Kabbalah course, and we're going to have reincarnation and things like that. But the Kabbalistic view is for the most part, all the souls that are on this earth have been here before multiple times. And therefore, when I see a person and I say, you know something, I see this person lived 100 years. I don't think the person did anything good. Total waste of time. He shouldn't have been here. One time he said hi to his neighbor, right? So from my perspective, we have a very limited view. From my perspective, this is an absolute failure. This is a waste of time. 100 years of breathing oxygen. What's the point? But from the divine perspective, or perspective of the mission of this person, it could be that this person, this soul already achieved everything it has to achieve. And in this world, all it has to do is say hi to its neighbor. And therefore this lifetime was a resounding success. Now we don't see, we have a very limited view of what the reality is. And therefore, we have to be humble when we talk about how we evaluate what a person's life is. Because like the Baal Shem Tov says, a person could come down, a soul can come down into this world for 70, 80 years to do one favor for another person. Could be more, but that itself is worth it. That itself is worth all the drama. You go on vacation, it's hard. You go out to the beach and it's sandy and it's too hot. The pictures all look good, but when you're there, it's not fun. It's too hot, you're too cold, you need the bathroom, the sand is getting everywhere, but you had a moment of bliss. Okay, so it's worth it. Right? So you could have 80, 90 years of pain, but the soul, from the soul's perspective, you did one mitzvah, it's worth it. So I'm saying we have to proceed with humility when we talk about when we try to evaluate even our mission, but certainly someone else's mission. But ultimately, we believe that yes, every soul, like Maimonides talks about this, that ultimately every spark comes back. No spark is pushed away forever. So we end up with an optimistic view.
Beautiful. So basically what you're saying, if I understood you correctly, that even if the person doesn't study Torah, the godly soul is still aware of that connection. So
either aware consciously or subconsciously. But the point is he studied all the Torah he had to for the past in the past incarnations.
Right.
Right now he has to, maybe all he has to do is whatever. Doesn't matter. Fill in the blank. Something good. One thing that to us seems teeny, small. And that's why from the Hasidic perspective, the Kabbalistic perspective, there is no such thing as something small. Because this encounter may be why I'm here for 800 years. So I see you in the street, I smile and say, good morning. It's not small. It could be small, but this could be my purpose. So there is no such thing. Once you have this perspective, you put on these glasses, there is no such thing as anything small anymore. That's the side effect of this philosophy.
Yeah, I understand. But with the Torah study, the potential is much greater because you can see bigger picture.
Yes.
And achieve more.
Yes, indeed. And also because you challenge, now you understand what the Torah is really trying to say. There's a beautiful medrash. The medrash says that when Moses climbs a mountain to get the Torah, the angels say, why are you giving it? What is a human being doing here? They say, God says, oh, he's coming to get the Torah. So God says, so Moshe says, so they say, why you have a precious gift? Why are you giving it to humanity? Give it to us. So God says to Moshe, you respond. So Moshe says, what does it say in the Torah? It says, honor your mother and father. Do you have a mother and father? No, it's not for you. It says, don't kill. Do you want to kill? Do you have evil inclination? No, it's not for you. And it goes on and on and on. The point is, the purpose of the Torah plays out not in the world of perfection. The hope, the growth that we can achieve through Torah study, the perspective that we could adapt is specifically tied into the fact that we are imperfect, that we are challenged, that we are, give me all the other synonyms for imperfection, flawed, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. That's where the beauty is. That's where the beauty is, and that's where the growth is. And it's not so much how much I grow, it's the fact that I'm moving. Once I move down here, it moves a lot in heaven. The metaphor is when the sun, the shadow moves 1 inch. In the heaven, the earth has moved many, many miles, right? So just because a little bit of movement down here makes a big picture, makes a big reflection above. So the point is not how much you moved. The point is you're moving as opposed to being stationary. That's the key. That's the critical difference between angel and human, and specifically the difference between the soul in heaven and the soul on earth. A branch and a staff, etc. I'm trying to touch all the metaphors. Okay, go ahead, Ben, please.
So back to your metaphor on the staff and the branch, it seems like that's a constant interplay in life, in that, the branch, I was specifically thinking about how when you talked about your metaphor, your cousins, which is, at least for me, I had close relationships with brothers and cousins, and then it changes, and all, but we're still standing. What I didn't hear was how that interplay, you're not completely broken off. You're still standing on the shoulders of that relationship, and that is important for Judaism, because as Jews, because we're like, yes, we're individuals, but we look back to Sinai constantly, and
if you want to go back to the metaphor, if I pick up a staff, I go to the store, I buy a staff, and I say, very interesting. I wonder what the material is. I don't know. Maybe I do know, but if I don't know, I go to the expert, and the expert takes it to the lab, and he says, unequivocally, this is a tree. I say, what? It's a tree? Doesn't look like a tree, doesn't feel like a tree, but the guy says, that's what it is. It's a tree. Look at the DNA. It's a tree. So my point is, I myself don't necessarily feel myself and my soul as an extension of godliness or the patriarchs, but that's only because I'm looking at a superficial level. The branch, my point is, the staff, you could talk to me all day long how it's disconnected, but it's not disconnected. But at the end, its substance itself is tree, nothing but tree, right? So you have to realize that. Maybe it's not obvious to the naked eye, but that's the reality. The staff is nothing other than a tree. It didn't come from anywhere else, right? It is tree. That's all it is. But it became its own person. Well, that's what a soul is. A soul is a part of God that became its own entity. But its substance is a spark of godliness.
Right, and that's important difference, a major difference, because in the Enlightenment with Descartes, when it was, he ended up, he never was able to get to the point of looking above him, because it's like, I'm a thinking being, and everything comes from the I. Whereas, it's important in this to say, yes, once we branch off, we're still standing on, we're still part of that, we're still have a background.
That's what we are.
That's higher than us.
100%.
That's higher.
100%.
And that can get missed in this idea that, you branch off and then you're lost.
Correct.
The soul is lost, or that you're somehow detached. There's an interplay of detach and not being detached and being connected at the same time. And I think that's I don't know, that's can get missed in this, I guess.
I agree. That's why it's important that you're emphasizing it. I would say also think about parent and child. So when the child is in the mother's womb, it's clear he's one entity with the parent. Child is born, child is very young, very dependent, and you say, this is my child. I feel the connection. But then the child gets a little older, you send them off to camp, send them off to school, and ultimately the child becomes its own entity. And that's the way it should be. But at the end of the day, you could say on many levels, the child is you becoming their own entity. And many people have a big trouble with that. Sometimes they look at their children and say, I don't know where you came from. I don't see that you come. I don't see any connection to you. Or on the other hand, many people have trouble understanding that the child is part of you, but part of you that becomes its own identity. So both sides of that equation is difficult, but both sides of that equation is true. And that's a metaphor to us because we're also the children of God. There's all kinds of metaphors in the Bible about our relationship with God. God is our parent, God is our spouse, God is our brother, God is our sister. There's all kinds of metaphors. But that's the beauty of the parent-child metaphor, not that we're a child that's sort of in the crib and totally dependent on our parent. That's not what the metaphor is trying to say. The metaphor is trying to say we are our own separate identity, but we're nothing other than the DNA of our parents or the genetic pool of our parents. So that's
So
that.
going one level higher into the Kabbalistic side, where you have an infinite and a finite, which doesn't even make any sense, and to us that we're not able to, say, oh yes, we're finite beings and part of an infinite. We say it every morning, in the Shema, and yet that interplay seems to be part of this discussion also.
Yes, we are an expression of the infinite, even though we feel disconnected. But that's why we need metaphors. That's why we have the staff metaphor, we have the child metaphor. But that's why the metaphors are here for. But it is a little bit of a paradox, just like the relationship between parent and child is a bit of a paradox. And that's why the child, in some cases, the child doesn't always feel it, but there's going to be moments where subconsciously, even if it's not rational, the child will sacrifice for their parent, just like it's more common that the parent sacrifices for the child. But occasionally it happens the other way around. Why? Because ultimately the child feels itself, even though it doesn't feel it in the conscious sense, but it feels that it's united, it's one entity with the parent. But it's complicated because it's a own identity that became we're one entity. I became separate, but it's one entity becoming separate. So it's a little bit of a paradox, but that's the reality. That's the staff metaphor. Okay, go ahead, Bob, please.
Thank you.
Thank you, Rabbi. I think every religion struggles with the concept of reincarnation and immortality. And if we technically believe that really this is the end of God's 4 books, where he actually was dictating and Moshe was writing, is this the little hint to us that there is reincarnation in Judaism, that there is an immortal spark that
Right.
is this, because clearly this is one of the biggest books in all of history, and they want to end with a bang. Is this clearly what we're getting from this?
It could be. I'll be honest that reincarnation is not written explicitly in the Torah. It's alluded to in many places, but it's not written explicitly. Just like the concept of the afterlife. It's also very interesting that the afterlife is not written explicitly in the 5 books of Moses. It's alluded to, but it's not written explicitly. But yes, I think if you talk about the life as in terms of a journey, then you say, okay, so where's the beginning of the journey and where's the end of the journey? Is my individual life the end of my journey, or am I part of a bigger story?
Right.
You get into the fact, because there's different ways of looking at it. You could look at it as a national story where every individual is part of, where I continue through my children. You see what I'm saying? Or the nation as a whole moves on, but I am submerged within the nation. But that's one model. But there's also the Kabbalistic model where the soul itself comes back, because the soul is just part of God and has a mission. And if the mission, now some souls complete its mission, but if the soul has not completed its mission, then it comes back to complete its mission, because the journey ultimately, God's plan is going to happen. We have free choice. I don't want to open up free choice now because that will take us an hour, but we have free choice. But we have only free choice. In other words, are we going to go into Israel this generation or next generation? Are we going to take the direct path or the detour? Now, detour is longer, but you also learn new things on the detour. Detour is more challenging, but you also learn new things on the detour. But ultimately, we believe that and Judaism believes, not just Kabbalah, that ultimately we reach a state of quote unquote perfection. We reach a state of the world reaching its purpose. And every individual spark is part of that story. And maybe some people have a longer detour and it's more painful, but at the end of the day, where there's risk, there's reward. The people who are experiencing more pain and more distance and more challenge are also, in a way, getting stronger. And that's the second half. I don't have too much time, but I want to say one thing. I'll say it by heart. I'm going to say the next point, and then I'm going to read a few lines from the essay of Yankee Tauber, and then we'll see if we have any time for questions, and then we'll have to resume. The next step we're going to say is as follows. When you say hardened, till now we're thinking about hardened in a negative way. Hardened means I'm disconnected from my source. But the Kabbalah is going to say, one second, hardened also represents the advantage that you get when you come to this world. Because hardened doesn't just mean I'm hardened, I'm losing life, I'm losing connection. Hardened also means I have to have the courage and the strength to overcome the challenge. Because in heaven, the soul is not challenged. So that in heaven, the soul loves God, but the soul is very weak. And the soul is, we have no idea what's going to happen when there is a challenge. So it's like a little beautiful plant, but it's in a safe environment. It's in a greenhouse. When you have to take that plant and put it outside, it's going to harden. It may change colors, but it's going to be able to survive. In other words, for the soul to come down, it's not just that it becomes separate in its consciousness from its source. Ben always reminds us that we're not separate. We're just in our consciousness, we're separate. But now we have to dig deeper and find strength that we never had. And that's how the word mateh is also not just the word mateh, the word staff is not just the indication of the separation, but it's also an indication of what happens to us, that when we make the commitments to live a moral life, connect to God, and do something positive in the face of challenge, because it's always easier to do the self-oriented thing. Always, 100% of the time. Now, it's not as meaningful. When you do that, when you transcend and you do something for someone else, that's where the pleasure is, but it's not easier. It's always easier to do the easy thing. But that idea that when you come into this world and you're challenged and you become hard, not just means you're disconnected, but it means that you now dig deeper and you find the strength that you did not have before, right? You go to the gym and they give you weights. So you say, the challenge itself makes you harder, makes you stronger. So your love to God, even though it's more pristine and more innocent in heaven, but it's not hardened in the positive sense. It doesn't have the strength to stand up to challenge. Now, when you're tested, now it becomes stronger, and now you're reaching a higher level. So that is the point. It's very beautiful, in my opinion. I want to just share one or two paragraphs from one of my favorite writers of all time, and he's on Chabad.org on this, on most parshas, but on this parsha too. I'm just going to read a line or two. I just like the way he puts it. Let's see if I can find it quickly in the Hasidic Masters. Yeah, I'll find it. I'll share it. Shabbat Shalom, Oren. Thank you for joining. Let's share. So in Chabad.org, you always have a section called from the Hasidic Masters, which is him, which is beautiful. Here it goes. Here is how he writes it. I'm just going to read 2 paragraphs, or maybe even less. The stick, it can be said, is a piece of a tree that has paid the price of leaving home. Indeed, one would hardly recognize it as a tender green shoot who departed from the mother tree. Its supple spine has stiffened into a column of inflexibility. Its porous skin has woodened into a core-deep hardness. The springy bow has become, well, a stick. So in that sense, the stick means you paid the price of this connection. The stick, it can also be said, is one who has reaped the reward of leaving home. The tender shoot has gained a backbone and stature. It has learned to stand its ground. No longer is it swayed by every passing wind and breeze. Its spell out in the cold has toughened it, made it a force to be reckoned with. The malleable spridge has solidified into the formidable staff. I can't do it better than this. Thank you, Yanky Tauber. Thank you all for joining. And have a wonderful Shabbos. The journey is continuing. We're finishing the 5th book. Life is a journey. We always keep growing. On the journey, there are detours, there are challenges. We grow from those challenges, ultimately reaching our goal, which is the biblical promise, the land of Israel, both physically but also metaphorically. Amen. Speedily in our days. Thank you all for joining.
Thank you so
Thank
much.
you. Shabbat Shalom.
Hello.
Shabbat Shalom. Thank you.
Thank you, Rabbi. Shabbat Shalom.
Thank you, Bob. Shabbat Shalom.